Hello. Good evening, Ask a Witch people. Here I am for the Monday vlog, and tonight I want to talk a little bit about drawing down the moon. And it's kind of a funny thing. I was sitting here in my ritual space that I have for another month and a half, and looking up at the moon. I can see the moon from where I'm sitting, and she's so beautiful, and over the trees and the land here, and I was just thinking how sad it is that I will have to give up this view. I've made my peace with this house, and now I have to leave it. So I don't know how to feel about that, but the moon is beautiful. So drawing down the moon is probably one of the more important aspects of Wiccan ritual. It's a kind of practice that is done in, I think, most religions, if not all of them. In voodoo, it's called being ridden, where the goddesses or gods come into the body and speak through you. In Hopi tradition, the Kachina are believed to inhabit the bodies of the dancers, and the words are viewed as being the words of the gods. Here in the Pacific Northwest, the Salish have traditions where they invite the animal spirits and the spirits, the gods and goddesses like Raven, into the dancers. And it's not viewed as dancing Raven, it's viewed as becoming Raven. Raven is in the body of the dancer. And so this kind of embodiment of the gods is, I think, in many ways almost a universal practice. I think one of the things that we don't see it as much in more stratified religious practices, like Christianity, mainly because I think it's a little threatening to embody a god. The whole purpose of many of the stratified religions is social control. Finding ways to keep people in order, keep people within a certain parameter of behavior, and becoming one with the gods is, well, that's a really powerful behavior. And so if you can become one with the gods, what do you need the priests for? Why would you need to follow the system of authority that is tied into religion? There'd be no reason. So we don't see it so much in those traditions, but I do know that embodiment of the gods was done in ancient times. Part of the Gnostic Gospels talks about the same kind of idea as drawing down the moon. Drawing down the moon is inviting the divinity of the goddess or the god into yourself, and letting them, or allowing them, or giving space for them to speak or dance or do whatever they want to do. Oftentimes, in the practice of the Great Rite, the goddess and god are called into the physical being before that is done, because it's a union between divinities, between masculine and feminine, which is viewed as very powerful in really almost every religion. And I've seen people do it, and I've also done it. It's very interesting to watch and to experience. I can tell you my own experience. The first time I ever did it was kind of a funny experience. I was in my backyard when I was living in Rockland in California, and we had set up a maypole, and there was about 4 of us that were going to do ritual, and there were 2 men and 2 women. And I had talked to one of the men earlier and said it felt really important to me to draw down divinity, and he said that sounded great, so he was willing to participate in that for the symbolic Great Rite for the ritual. So we did the ritual, and we got to that point in the ritual, And, I said, okay, I'm going to draw down the moon and the sun so that we can do the great rite as God and Goddess. And as I was saying the words to draw down the goddess, the man who had agreed to draw down the sun, or the god, started saying an invocation, and so did the other man who was with us, who had not been invited to do it. And so there's this whole, I'm hearing these two men, and I can feel her coming into my being, and I hear this voice inside my head that says, tell him to shut up. Tell him to stop talking. It is not his turn. And I'm like, inside my head, I'm thinking, I can't say that. I can't tell my friend to shut up. Finally, I reached out and put my hand on his shoulder and looked at him. And I think he saw that she was there, and he stopped speaking. And it was really intense. And then after that, me and the other man who I had talked to earlier went ahead and did the rituals, and there was some talking, and it was very interesting to be in that position, because it wasn't like I didn't have the power to speak or represent myself. It was, I was certainly present, but it was like there was two of us. There was more than one being inside my head and inside my energy field. And so that was really a curious experience. And it was nice in a way, because at first I was a little scared. I didn't really know what would happen. When you invite a spirit being to take over your body, you don't really know for sure what the result of that is going to be. And, you just have to be in trust. You have to be in perfect love and perfect trust for that. It requires just stepping back and letting it happen. And so that's what I did. Is I just stepped back and I let it happen. And it was a really wonderful experience. And then another time I was doing a ritual. I had been asked, Janet Farrer and Gavin Bone had come to the United States. They were staying with my friend Luna, and Janet pulled me aside earlier that day and said, I want to do an initiation ritual for Luna, and would you help? And I said, well, sure, of course I would help. Luna was my very best friend at that time. And so we got to the evening, and we were getting ready to do ritual, and circle was cast, and Janet did the drawing down of the moon ritual, and she turned to look at me, and it was like there were no eyes. Like her eyes were just dark. And Gavin said, there goes Janet. And that was very interesting. She was very intense and different and queenly, I would say, for the remainder of the ritual. And of course, anything she asked me to do, I did, because I felt the presence of that divinity in the circle. Now, we don't really know how to deal with that in the West, because we think the only kind of thing like that we have, the only comparative we have in the West, is possession. And we've painted that as a very ugly thing that only happens with evil beings and ghosts. But actually, there's a lot of religions that believe that you can become one with divinity, that if you invite divinity into your physical being, that it can come and be there. And I've had a number of philosophical discussions about this with people, and the people ask me, well, why on earth would they, they're gods, why on earth would they want to be in a physical being, even for a few minutes? How restricting would that be? And my thought was, yeah, but if you're not in a physical being, all the things that make physicalness wonderful, like emotion, bad or good, physical sensation, eating, all those kind of things are things that you can't experience except in corporeal form. And so there's pleasures associated with the physical body, and why would they not want to be a part of that? Why would they not want to, especially in a safe situation where, a priestess that honors them is inviting them, hey, come and use my body for a little while. And, in shamanic traditions, it's pretty much prescribed, like with shamans, they will call a god or goddess being, a healer being, into themselves, and then do ritual to heal. And they have You know, people in the West have really weird ideas about shamanic healing, but I can tell you that the statistics are that, especially for mental illness, but for a lot of kinds of maladies, shamans in lots of cultures have a higher healing rate than we do here. And I think it has a lot to do with sensitivity to the emotional aspect of illness and spiritual aspects of illness as well. And so shamans definitely do this in really all traditional cultures that I know of. And in cultures, like I said earlier, like voodoo or Santeria, you know, inviting the spirit or the god into your body is part of it. You know, the initiates, and not everyone becomes initiated because it's a big responsibility. And so the initiates to certain gods or goddesses may invite those spirits to come into them and sing or dance or prescribe or whatever it is that they want to do. And there's some very fantastical videos out there of priests or priestesses who are under the influence of a divine being walking over hot coals or putting a nail through their tongue and not bleeding, or all kinds of things like that that would normally cause a physical being a lot of pain and blisters and a number of other problems, which don't happen in this situation. It's like being possessed by a divine being shields them from injury. And so calling down the moon in the Wiccan tradition is simply that, is just calling divinity into your being. Now it's funny to look at this because I grew up a Christian, and when I was probably 10, I decided that I didn't want to be a Catholic anymore because I just didn't believe that God was a sexist. And I certainly didn't believe that God was a racist. And so I just didn't buy those ideas. So I went looking for some other brand of religion. And I looked at a lot of Christianity before I moved outside of that. And I went to a Methodist church camp, and a couple summers actually. And one of the things that the Methodists do is they draw the Christ being, the divinity of Christ, into themselves. And so I did that, you know, and thinking about it later on when I became a witch and started to draw down the moon, it feels the same. There's this euphoric feeling when spirit enters your body. It's kind of overwhelming, and you want to laugh and cry at the same time, and you're really overwrought by emotion and intensity, and you feel just really super grateful and kind of amazing. And I had that experience as a Christian, but I also have had it a number of times since then as a pagan. And so that was kind of where I got to the point where I came to the conclusion that I would not change religions again, because why would I? If the core of divinity is something that you can commune with in any tradition, what difference does it make what you call it? What difference does it make what the path of pictures along the way looks like? It really has to do with your relationship with the divine. And so one of the things I love about Wicca is that it's part of what is expected, part of what is considered vital to becoming a very connected to nature kind of priestess, is being connected to that goddess energy. And so so there's a lot of different methods that people use for drawing down the moon. There's invocations, certainly, and Janet has her own invocations, and I've read invocations by Buckland and others. And for me, drawing down the moon is done by really looking at her, you know, looking at the moon in the sky and thinking of the changeability of the goddess. There's some old literature I read a long time ago that said one of the best ways to draw down the moon was to have a reflective, you know, platter or something like a silver platter, and put it on your altar so that you can see the moon, see her in the moon, or a bowl of water, something like that. You can see my little kitty has decided he needs to be a part of this again. He loves Ask a Witch. He's my little witch kitty. And so where you can see the moon, you know, putting like a bowl of water on your altar where the reflection of the moon is in there. And then allowing yourself to trance with that. That's also another part of embodiment of spirit is trance. And if you look at the Maasai or of Africa, or the Hopi of southern U.S., or the Salish here in the Pacific Northwest, or the Santeria Voodoo, all of those Haitian type and the overlay of Catholic type religions, they all have that shamanic base of trance to get in contact with the supernatural. And so this is a little funny side note, any of those religions that are related to voodoo, hoodoo, Santeria, all of them, they all have a base of Catholicism. Part of it is because the saints actually kind of correspond and are easily syncretized with the Orishas or the Loa, the spirits. And so there's funny sayings like, the island is, maybe 50% voodoo, but, and or 25% or 50% Catholic and 50% Protestant and 100% voodoo, because most voodoo or most of those spirit traditions have an underlying current of that introduced religious structure that came over with Europeans. So in order to call the moon down, just, you can light a candle and stare into it, or you can have a bowl of water. I like a bowl of water. Or I like to just look at her, just sit in my yard or in my ritual space and look at the moon and contemplate the changeability and the wonder of nature. The moon is full of wonder for me. It's, you always see the same side of her face. You never really see her dark side. You only see her light side, and because she's facing you always. And the changeability from day to day, there's never 2 days where the moon is the same, is very much a statement in nature about change and how important it is to embrace change and to not fight it too much, because it's part of our experience as nature priests and priestesses. So for me, that's generally what does it, and then I'll say some words. You can memorize an invocation if you want to, but I don't really get much joy out of doing that. I just talk to her, and then the next thing I know, she's here, and I can hear her in my head, and I can hear what she's saying, and I can see what she's doing, and I can intercede if I want to. I usually don't care to, but I can. It's not like you're taken out of your body and can't control yourself. It's more like a sisterhood. What I really was unprepared for in my first experience with drawing down the moon was her sense of humor, because she was just very clear with me about what she thought was reasonable to do and what she wanted to say, and I my social limitations wouldn't let me say the things she was saying, because they weren't nice, but they weren't mean, but they were concise and not interested in whatever anybody else's drama was, and it was hard for me to say anything, and that's why I just put my hand on the shoulder of my friend, because I guess I just knew that if he took one look at me as a priest to the goddess, he would see in my face that she was already here, and that if he was supposed to come along, he would already have done so. So, calling down the moon is, I think, a really critical practice to any kind of shamanistic type religious tradition, calling divinity to become one with divinity. That's one of the things that's been a part of our religious practice, our history as humans, since I think the beginning of human consciousness. And the only reason why it has left some structured forms of Christianity and some structured forms of other kinds of organized religions is because of power. Because if you can become the goddess, is there any higher power? I mean, that was one of the reasons why Joan of Arc was burned at the stake. You know, she heard the voices of gods or spirits, and they told her things, and obviously good information, because she led the French to victory over the English on the information these voices were giving her. And when she was asked about them, she told the leadership that her voices had a higher authority than the church or the leadership, and they didn't like that. And so they burned her as a witch, and then they elevated her to sainthood later on. But I think that the church recognizes when it happens. I think it scares the hell out of the power structures when it happens, which in my opinion is one of the most important reasons to connect with divinity yourself, to not have to go through a priest or intermediary. This was something I always found difficult, and I wonder if it's a part of a past life situation, because it was explained to me at very early age, you know, at like 5 or 6, that I had to go to confession to tell my priest all the things that I felt like I had done that were sinful, because he had to forgive me first, because I had to go through him to get to God. And my response even at 5 or 6 was like, what? I don't have to go through him. I can go directly to God. And it just always amazed me that anyone thought that you couldn't go directly to spirit or to, you know, divinity. But I do know that a lot of Christians are convinced that that is the case. And I think it's because it was taken out of common religious practice during the Inquisition, because it was very threatening to the power structures at that time. And so getting in touch with the goddess or with the divinities, with deity, is a very big part of religious practice. And I think that we have to take it back. I think that one of the things that has happened, especially in the Western world, is that this ability to call down divinity, feminine divinity, has been viewed as evil, or, you know, something to be controlled or limited. And so it's part of, I think it's part of worshiping a goddess, or part of connecting with the idea of feminine power, is that you don't have to go through a man, or you don't have to go through a priest to find your divinity. You can go yourself to deity and commune there with deity. So, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why calling down the moon should be more common. I don't know a lot of people who've done it. And there was a point in my spiritual practice where I didn't know anybody who had done it. And there's more people now that I know. But when I started teaching comparative religion, I started to see those overlaps between, you know, other cultures and other religions, and shamanic Celtic shamanism, which is what Wicca is. And it really opened my eyes to what had been taken away from traditional people, what had been taken away from tribal people by structured power structure religion. And so being in touch with a spiritual being, being able to invite a spiritual being as in a mediumship, or being able to invite divinity into your body, means that you can allow divinity to work through you, that you can allow spirits to heal through you, to do their divine work that they are able to do because of where they are coming in from. You can be an instrument of healing, an instrument of inspiration, an instrument of joy, an instrument of love for divinity in the physical world. You know, one of the things that we say in Wicca is that goddess is immanent. That means in the world, not out there or up there or out, you know, in the world. And how much, I mean, inviting the goddess into yourself, you don't get more immanent than that. Having a personal relationship with divinity is, I think, a really important part of religious practice, and very healing to the heart and to the soul. I think we're a lot pieces of divinity, and sometimes when we connect with a more clear power, divinity or a spirit being, sometimes we become more clear ourselves. And that's really, I think, the purpose of drawing down the moon. So while I sit here and I look up out my window and I can see the beautiful moon in the sky from where I'm sitting, I can feel inspired by that beauty and inspired by that change and inspired by that larger than myself natural sacredness that is the experience of everyday nature, changes in nature. And that I think is a really important thing. I think it's what's missing in modern life. I mean, I think one of the reasons we are so keen to destroy everything to use as a resource is because we've forgotten the sacredness of a wildflower. We've forgotten the sacredness of dirt. We've forgotten the sacredness of a fruit tree. We've forgotten the sacredness of many things. And so we don't care for them the way we did once. And I think sometimes when we do rituals like drawing down the moon, it helps us to remember the importance of that caretaker aspect of what we do. You know, we are here to learn, but we are not here to destroy. We are not here to use up. We are not here to disrespect. And for me, at least, drawing down the moon clarified that crystal. It really crystal clear clarified that for me. And so I think if you haven't done a drawing down the moon ceremony, and you haven't just, I mean, you don't just have to do it if you're doing a ritual with a group or anything. You can just sit there alone and do it and just sit with her. Sit with her and see what she says and see what she does and see how she feels inside your skin. It's really pretty awesome. So, so that's my vlog on drawing down the moon, and I hope that you got something out of it, enjoyed it. Next week I'll be doing using animal spirits and spirit guides, and I'll talk about different animals and meanings of animals and experience of animal and plant spirit guides that I've had over the years, and what I think about that. And so I hope you will tune in next Monday. And also, I as always, will be putting all of the vlogs on Patreon. I'm a little bit behind with all the things that are going on in my life right now, but I do have them saved, and I will upload them along with one of the herbal classes that I've been doing on there in the next couple of days. I should be able to get them in by Wednesday or Thursday. So watch for that. And if you haven't been to Patreon, it's just patreon.com /CroneWitch with a Y, and you can see the things that are there. And there are some things there that are just for patrons, but there are also things, Ask a Witch broadcasts, and also so a few other things besides that you are there for you to enjoy. They're also on YouTube. So thank you for being here and for supporting my work by watching this vlog, and I'll see you next Monday. Bye.